Well, I had a lovely time in the Yorkshire Dales last week. Because it was so hot, I went out very early in the morning to do the walks that I had planned. And then in the afternoons, I rested, I did some reading, and I also reflected back over my life's journey, and especially the first decade of my life. Now, last time I told you that fear was my constant companion during that period of my life. And that wasn't just because of my home situation. It was also because in those days, in the 1960s, school was a fearful place to be because of the teaching methods and especially the discipline. And I remember when I was 6 or 7 having to pluck up courage to approach my school teacher to recite my 4 times table. But unfortunately for me, I approached her when she was just about to take the register. Now, she'd obviously got out of the bed the wrong side that morning because she was so irritated. She grabbed me by the arm and literally flung me across the room. Well, I don't remember what happened to me physically, but I can say it didn't do anything to help my confidence. Then, several years later, something else happened which I don't think I will ever forget. In fact, recently I was going through the box of photos from my family and I discovered that my mother had kept a newspaper cutting of a picture which includes the people I'm going to mention in this story. At that time I was in the class of a lady called Miss Edmond, and she was really the nicest teacher in the whole school. However, she was approaching retirement and she wasn't in the best of health. And on one of the days that she was off sick, the headmistress stood in for her. Now, they found some plimsolls in our class, you know, those canvas sports shoes that belonged to a child from a different class. And so the headmistress wanted a volunteer to take the shoes to that child. Somehow I got volunteered. This meant I had to cross the school hall and then knock on a closed door, enter, go up to the teacher and explain why I was there. And being a very shy child, that was really too daunting for me to do. And so I said, I don't know where the classroom is. Now, if you said that to Miss Edmond, she would pick up that you were shy and she would always say, oh, you can take your best friend with you. So I assumed that's what would happen. But unfortunately for me, it backfired with the headmistress and she merely accused me of lying. And worse still, when I came back from that traumatic experience, she made this announcement to the class that I was in disgrace and that no other child was allowed to speak to me for the rest of the day. Well, many years later, I was watching the film of Jane Eyre, and if you're familiar with that story, you'll know something similar happened to her. In her case, she was falsely accused of being a liar, made to stand on a pedestal in the centre of the school so that she would be humiliated and ostracised by the other students. I looked up on Google and it said in the 1960s it was common to publicly humiliate children in order to terrify other children into submission. I don't know what kind of educational policy that was, but anyway. The thing is, though, when you're a small child, what do you do with that fear and trauma and all those feelings? I couldn't talk to my parents because I didn't have a close enough relationship with them. But I thank God that because of Sunday school, I knew Jesus. In fact, in the book of Proverbs in the Bible, it says, there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And I would say that's what Jesus was for me. And so I remember that every night I used to pray this prayer. Lord, keep us safe this night, secure from all our fears. May angels guard us while we sleep till morning light appears. Many years later, when I was in Ghana, I think that fear of doing something disgraceful came back when I was going through a tough time. And I really thought I was going to mess up. And so it was a great comfort to me then when God turned my attention to this verse in Isaiah. So I'm going to read from the New International Version, Isaiah 54, verse 4. It says, do not be afraid, you will not be put to shame. Do not fear disgrace, you will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth. What a great comfort that was for me. This is Junior, and I will continue my story next week. Same time, same place.